The medieval Crusaders didn't simply march into battle, carrying random weapons. They held in their hands tools of destruction, so carefully designed and perfected that even today, their names send a chill through historians. These weren't clumsy hunks of metal swung wildly in desperation. They were finely crafted instruments of war, created by master blacksmiths and wielded by warriors who spent their lives mastering the art of killing. Let's uncover the real truth of Crusader weaponry. Forget the Hollywood image of awkward swords and bulky shields. In reality, the Crusades fueled a technological arms race, an era where weapons became so advanced and effective that they reshaped how humans killed each other for centuries. These wars weren't just clashes of faith. They became testing grounds where European, Byzantine, and Islamic military technologies collided, merged, and evolved into something terrifyingly effective. What makes this story even more shocking? These medieval warriors had no gunpowder, no explosives, no modern metals. Yet they still created weapons that could pierce the strongest armor of their time, crush bones in one strike, and deliver death with surgical accuracy. Archaeological discoveries on Crusader battlefields show wounds so brutal that forensic experts today struggle to understand how some victims managed to survive long enough to receive multiple injuries. And it all begins with a weapon that defined an entire age of war: the Crusader sword. The Crusader sword was not just a tool of war. It was a symbol of faith forged into steel. When a knight drew his blade, he wasn't simply readying for combat. He was literally holding a cross in his hands. The crossguard of the sword deliberately echoed the image of Christ's crucifixion, turning each weapon into a sacred symbol capable of splitting a man's skull. Far from the crude props you see in movies, these swords were marvels of engineering. A typical knightly blade measured 70 to 80 centimeters in length, carefully balanced for single-handed use, yet still powerful enough to cut through armor. The quality of steel, however, made all the difference. European swordsmiths, especially those in Toledo, Spain, had perfected their craft since Roman times. Their blades held razor-sharp edges, cut through mail armor, and bent without breaking. Yet even Toledo's best creations pale when compared to what Crusaders encountered in the East. Damascus steel, this legendary material, made from what steel imported from southern India and Sri Lanka, had almost magical properties. When forged correctly, Damascus blades displayed rippling patterns across the metal, evidence of their unique crystalline structure. They were sharper, stronger, and far more durable than anything Europe had seen. Knights brought these blades home as early as the 11th century, but the secret of what steel's production remained hidden in India until the 19th century. Imagine standing in battle, striking with your best sword, only to watch it bounce off an enemy's armor, while his Damascus blade slices through yours as if it were paper. This wasn't just a technological gap. It was psychological warfare that shattered confidence before the fight even began. As armor improved, new weapons were needed. The mace was one of the most terrifying answers. Unlike swords, which demanded years of training and precision, the mace was brutally simple: a wooden shaft topped with a heavy metal head. It was destruction made easy. Basic ball maces were deadly enough, but medieval engineers pushed the design further. Flange maces had ridges that concentrated force to punch through armor joints. Spiked maces could pierce steel plates. Knob maces multiplied impacts, breaking bones with a single swing. What made the mace horrifying wasn't just the damage it caused, but the sound it made. Archaeological studies of Crusader battlefields reveal skulls crushed so violently that modern experts classify the injuries as unsurvivable. The sickening crunch of metal striking armor was so distinct that veterans learned to fear it instantly. It was the sound of a life ending. Then came the battle axe, a weapon that was both affordable and devastating. Roughly the size of a sword but cheaper to produce, it needed little training to master. The heavy axe head could smash armor and bones with sheer force, while its sharp edge could slice through mail and leather with shocking efficiency. Accounts from the time describe limbs being severed so cleanly that victims often didn't realize they'd been injured until they collapsed. The axe could hook enemy shields, drag knights from horses, and smash helmets wide open. Medieval manuals even detailed strategies for systematically dismantling an enemy's defenses before landing the fatal blow. But nothing struck more fear into the hearts of soldiers than the poleaxe. This was a pinnacle of medieval weapon design, an all-in-one tool built to defeat the strongest armor ever made. Measuring between 4 and 7 feet long, the poleaxe combined multiple killing tools at its head: a razor-sharp axe blade for slicing, a hammerhead for crushing, and a thrusting spike that could pierce armor with surgical precision. Unlike crude weapons, this was deliberate engineering. Even the wooden shaft was reinforced with riveted steel strips called languettes, preventing enemies from chopping it apart during combat. Medieval combat guides described the poleaxe as capable of smashing, cutting, piercing, hooking, tearing, prying, and crushing. Its effectiveness gave rise to the term poleaxed, used to describe the brutal executions carried out with single strike to the head. Archaeological evidence confirms that these weren't reckless swings. Fighters aimed at weak points in armor with accuracy that rivaled surgical strikes. Training with the poleaxe was so advanced that mastering it was said to prepare a warrior for every other medieval weapon. It was a graduate school of killing. Once you knew the poleaxe, you could wield anything. The most revolutionary Crusader weapon, however, wasn't swung at all. It was fired, the crossbow. Unlike traditional longbows that required years of practice and enormous strength, the crossbow gave killing power to almost anyone. Its bolts were designed for specific tasks: bodkin points to pierce mail armor, broadheads to cause massive bleeding, and hardened tips to punch through steel plate. Some crossbows had draw weights exceeding 1,200 pounds, firing bolts that could pierce a knight's armor and still wound the man standing behind him. This changed everything. Suddenly, a peasant with a crossbow could kill a heavily armed knight from 400 meters away. The feudal system, built on the dominance of cavalry, was shaken to its core. So dangerous was the crossbow that the church tried to ban it in 1139, calling it too inhumane. But armies ignored the order, because those who used crossbows crushed those who didn't. On top of all this, Crusader warfare pushed siege technology to terrifying heights. The trebuchet, for example, was capable of launching 300-pound stones over 300 meters with incredible accuracy. These weren't crude catapults. They were calculated machines, designed with precise mathematical ratios of counterweight and trajectory. And they weren't just used for destroying walls. Chroniclers wrote of trebuchets flinging plague-infected corpses, severed heads, and even Greek fire into cities under siege, breaking morale long before walls fell. So the next time you watch a movie showing knights clumsily clanking around with dull weapons, remember this: Crusaders were not primitive warriors stumbling through the Dark Ages. They were armed with some of the most advanced and deadly technology the world had ever seen. Every weapon, from the cross-shaped sword to the crushing poleaxe and the terrifying trebuchet, was a masterpiece of engineering designed to solve a battlefield problem with brutal efficiency. These weren't just tools of death. They changed the way humans thought about war and laid the groundwork for centuries of military innovation. Archaeological evidence makes it clear: medieval battlefields were not places of random chaos. They were laboratories of destruction where the sharpest minds of the age devoted themselves to one task: creating weapons that could end life as efficiently as possible. And that legacy of ingenuity, brutality, and innovation is something we should never forget.